Hey, everybody. Today I'm going to read this book to you. It's called City Hawk, The Story of Pale Male by Meghan McCarthy. I know that I read this to you before as a librarian. A number of years ago, we had Meghan McCarthy in as an author and we got to listen to her. But since our science unit is using the story about Pale Male, I thought you might like to listen to this book again, even though I read it. And here the author has signed this book for us. She drew a little picture of Pale Male. City Hawk, the story of Pale Male, written and illustrated by Meghan McCarthy. New York City is bustling with cars, buses, and people hurrying to important places. There's lots of tall buildings, lots of streets, and lots of pollution. That's why so many people flock to the city's largest park for a needed escape. While in Central Park, New Yorkers can take a nap in the grass, play catch on one of the sprawling lawns, or get a glimpse of a squirrel scurrying up a tree. What they never expect to see is real wildlife, animals that usually make their homes in forests or on mountaintops by rivers. Passers-by couldn't believe their eyes when a red-tailed hawk was spotted flying over Fifth Avenue. Bird watchers took an interest in the hawk and they named him Pale Male because of his light feathers. Pale is another word for being very light skinned. So they named him Pale Male, male because he's a boy, because of his light feathers. Day after day, month after month, Pale Male could be seen soaring high above Central Park. After Pale Male was sighted near a pond in Central Park, flying over the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and by a hot dog stand. It was clear he was there to stay. Every year, the ritual would begin. One year, Pale Male found a bird named Lola. She was a hawk, too. Her feathers were darker than his, and she was bigger in size. Pale Male dove and swooped and fluttered around Lola. Those of you that are bird lovers know that the female birds are bigger than the male birds, right? Together, the two birds gathered twigs and branches and piled them atop an apartment building overlooking Central Park. Large spikes meant to ward off pigeons made it easy for Pale Male and Lola to build a nest. But what they didn't know was they were being watched. Across Fifth Avenue into Central Park and past a small body of water called the Boat Pond, a group of people watched hawks intently. Here they are. They were young and old people, men and women. The most dedicated of these bird watchers called themselves the regulars. The regulars carried big cameras and telescopes, and they watched the action excitedly, like die-hard fans viewing their favorite sporting event. The question on everybody's mind was, did Lola lay eggs? Some of you may have gone to Central Park to this little pond over here. It's kind of a famous place. I bet you can imagine that. Yes, they did lay eggs. But when would they hatch? The regulars arrived at the park before the sun came up and didn't leave until the sun went down. They waited in the rain. They waited in the dark. They waited and waited and waited. Finally, two babies were born. They chirped excitedly for food. Pale Male was a good dad and worked tirelessly to bring plenty of food back for them. The regulars named one baby Handsome and the other one Gretel, from the fairy tale Hansel and Gretel, but they called them Handsome and Gretel. When the babies grew enough feathers and became strong, it was time for them to fly. Most hawks usually practiced by hopping from tree to tree, but there were no trees. The babies would have to leap off the tall building and fly across Fifth Avenue. The fall down would be far. They hopped and hopped and hopped some more, but neither of the birds flew. At last, one morning, before the sun peaked above the trees, one baby took off for first flight, disappearing into the dark blue sky. The daylight brought new excitement. Soon, both babies were exploring the park. The regulars watched it all. Their early mornings and late nights in the park were worth every minute. If you go into Central Park and you watch and wait, you may see a pale feathered hawk. And chances comes and come spring, chances are there will be a nest. And inside their nest, there may be several eggs with babies ready to greet the world. So I'm going to read you a little bit more about Central Park and Pale Male and Lola. This book was written, let's see, in 2007. So it's 13 years old, this story. So let's see. Okay, the Pale Male story. So there are quite a few hawks in Central Park. We know, or in the New York City area. We know that. And the hawks are kind of known as a nuisance in New York City because a lot of the hawks are building nests on top of apartment buildings, expensive apartment buildings. And as I think you may remember from me talking about eagle nests, nests can be very messy, messy places. So that these hawks over here built a nest on this apartment building. I'm trying to find the picture. On this apartment building here, right? And these are expensive apartment buildings. And when they're done with food, they just throw it over. And, when they poop, they don't poop in their nest. It goes over the side. So the people who live on the bottom of these apartment buildings don't really appreciate having the hawks there. So a group of people did try to get pale males, I believe it was in 2004, tried to get pale male's nest removed. And, the regulars didn't like that. They wanted to keep the nest there because they wanted to keep the bird there. So there was quite controversy about it. And if you would like to learn more about this, you can actually look it up. You can type in pale male New York City 2004 in a Google search, and you'll see some reporters reporting about this at the time and some different information about it. I do have other books about pale male in the library. If you're interested in that, you can let me know. But it was a pretty interesting story, and I have this book out as well. If anybody wants to read it, you can ask me for a copy of it. There's some quite detailed information in there about hawks and about this particular story. I didn't want to read the whole thing to you because it would be a little bit too long, but I thought you might enjoy this. So there you go, City Hawk, the story of Pale Male.